I drum my talons on the footboard of the Terran's hospital bed, my disapproving eyes moving up and down his battered body, taking in the extent of the damage. Security Specialist Taylor, please tell me about your encounter with the Ateskian Merc-Beast, I say, as sternly as I can muster. A look of shame crosses his face as he begins. Well, Cap, you see, it's, I snap my beak in reproof, and he shuts up. Your compatriots might have died, Taylor. Now. I take a deep inhale of the oxygen-rich ward air to calm myself. Tell me what happened. Taylor steadies himself before speaking. I was safeguarding an expedition to the Twilight Zone on Ateska Free. The researchers had spread out to collect samples, and I was trying to keep my head on a swivel. You know what, with it being a death rod and all. Then, from about 30 meters away, I heard research lead Sha'anza scream. Immediately I saw her running and shouted at her to run to me. I dropped my shotgun and leveled it in the direction she'd come from, and that's when I saw it looping after her. It was... Here, he trails off, so I decide to interrupt. It was an Ateskian Merc-Beast, Taylor. One of the only creatures in known space that's a credible threat, even to an armed Terran. Native Earth fauna excluded, of course. 300 kilograms of dense bone, muscle and sinew. 6 legs, each hanging 2 claws, specifically shaped for optimal disemboweling of its prey. A maw full of upwards of 50 razor teeth. If we'd known that thing was in the area, we never would have greenlit the expedition. Why, by the spires of Akaros, didn't you just shoot that monster? He looks abashed, but doesn't answer, so I change tack. The reason it's a legal requirement to have a Terran escort on expeditions to Death Worlds, Taylor. What is it? Blinking at me for a moment, he answers. You mean, aside from the obvious? He flexes his unbroken arm, showing off a bicep thicker around than my chest. I chirp irritably. It's not your strength or your ferocity, Taylor. If it was something like that, you could be substituted with a high-spec combat droid. It's your sense of self-preservation. You're the only sapient Death World species known. You're supposed to have a sense of danger that droids can't replicate. You're supposed to have your wits about you in a way that the rest of us just don't and can't, having evolved on sane planets. So tell me, why did my legally mandated armed Terran chaperone decide to attempt to wrestle a Merc-Beast to death instead of just shooting the Akaros damn thing? Here a look of genuine confusion passes over the Terran's face. What do you mean, wrestle to death? Confused myself, I glance at the holopad, where Sha'anza's after-action report is written. Research lead Sha'anza indicates that after she had reached the relative safety of the shuttle, she watched as you dropped your firearm. The Merc-Beast skidded to a halt, a scant meter from you, and you stared each other down for a few moments before you initiated a wrestling match by tapping it on the nose. This story was corroborated by every other researcher present. Are you claiming that this sequence of events is false? The Terran scratches his stubbled chin for a few moments, seeming to think. Not so much false, more like misinterpreted. Me and Fluffy were playing. I'm utterly dumbstruck for a few moments before I stammer out, playing? By the Titan Spear, Taylor. What do you mean you were playing? Captain, Taylor responds, now deadly serious. It was love at first sight. Fluffy is the cutest thing I've ever set my eyes on. Like someone blended all the cutest bits of an otter, an owl, a kitty, a pupper, and a baby seal into one big old distilled cute. She was just begging to have that little button-nose booped. After that, it was ear scritches and tummy rubs and cuddle wrestling, when he stopped because she tucked herself out. At a loss, I ask the only question my mind can present coherently. How? How can you call that monster cute? I don't understand. He frowns before raising his unbroken hand in a fist. Is he going to punch me? Instead of punching me, he extends a finger. One, she got these big old poppy dog eyes, like, whoa, like biggest eyes you've ever seen on anything. Collecting myself, I respond. These would be the eyes specifically adapted to tracking prey in the permanent crepuscular gloom of its home environment? And the button nose that you booped would be the one that's perfectly adapted to allow it to smell a drop of blood from 15 kilometers away? Scowling, the Terran leans forward and says, in a mix of hurt and anger, He's a she, Captain, not an it. Alarmed now, I fan out my flight feathers in a gesture of mollification, which seems to satisfy the deranged Terran. He extends a second finger. Those tiny little knobbed necks with those adorable toe beans? You mean the short legs that allow her to keep a low profile while stalking? The toe beans that allow her to both pad silently and retain traction in an all-out sprint? And you didn't mention the 7-centimeter claws that she uses to eviscerate anything unlucky enough to be caught by her? Waving his counting hand back and forth in a dismissive gesture, he continues. Her floopy ears? Another finger. Her flapping tail? Another finger. Oh, and her fur, Captain, her fur. You've never felt anything so soft and silky. It's like stroking a cloud. A thumb this time. I refrain from pointing out the predatory functions of these attributes. Taylor, if you just played with the merbeast, then why are you lying in the ship's medical ward? Taken aback, he answers, This? Gesturing at his broken arm, bloodied face and bruised body. This is completely unrelated. After the end of the mission, I had a bit too much celebratory whiskey and ended up falling down Access Stereo 5. I was off duty, but I know there's no excuse. I'm sorry, Cap. Masking my shock, I sardonically responded. So, the mighty Death Welder who wrestled an Ateskin merkbeast in fun was defeated by a staircase after purposely impairing his own judgment, is that right? Remember how you're supposed to have a better sense of self-preservation than the rest of us? Taylor has the decency to look guilty. Trying not to look as worried as I feel, I approach his side and rest my wing claws on the back of his hand. Victor, my friend. Taylor scrunches his face and responds, Nothing good follows when you call me Victor. Ignoring him, I continue. How long has it been since you spent time in the company of another Terran? He thinks about the question for a moment. I guess it has been a while. I level a sympathetic gaze up into his mournful green eyes. Victor, I am at fault here. I must say until today, the implications of hiring a lone member of such a highly social species did not occur to me. The next time we dock, I will take on a few more Terrans, and then you will have some friends who will be able to keep you sane. By Terran standards. Okay? No more wrestling dangerous indigenous fauna. No more whiskey benders. No more falling downstairs. How does that sound? Turning away in an attempt to hide his watery eyes, he responds in a slightly cracking voice. Yeah, Cap. That sounds good. Doing my best to mimic a Terran smile, I turn to go before adding, Perhaps you should also look into getting a pet, Victor. You're clearly starved for this cuteness you insist the merbeast exhibited. He responded, Oh, that's not necessary anymore. I keep walking and am almost out of the room before fear roots me to the spot, my crown plume feathers raised in agitation. I turn in slowly dawning horror. What do you mean anymore, Victor? I say, barely keeping my voice steady. He averts his eyes. Victor? What do you mean anymore? More silence. Victor? You didn't bring the merkbeast onto my ship, did you? Just then, the lighting switches to an emergency blue, and klaxons sound.